This will get into my great-grandfather's history of the Glenn family. The only thing I can tell you about that, Brad, when he was at Ellis Island, checked on the immigration, couldn't find their names. They came, they worked their way over. They worked on the ship, so they were not passengers. Probably shoveled coal, and they probably had coal furnaces, and that's probably what they did to come over here. My great-grandfather had 6 children, the 2 boys, George and Thomas, and there was 4 girls. Aunt Lizzie Kaufman was one of them who lived in Stanford, and when I was superintendent of Sunday school, I used to have her have the closing prayer because she could pray so earnestly. And so she lived in Stanford, and we had Aunt Lily and Aunt Anna lived in California. And they would come back once in a while to see my grandfather. The other girl, there would be 4 girls. The other one, I'm not sure. I don't know about it. He lived in Stanford, where he lived, well, all the time that I knew him, man, when I was a kid. I remember he'd go old and he'd get down in his yard with a pocket knife and cut out dandelions. And I remember when he was out home one time, because they owned the place where my folks lived. And I remember him coming out there. Don't remember him just too well, but I remember going in there to eat. But like my mother said, or what we said now, that was his second wife. That wasn't really the great-grandmother. And then when he died, my grandfather, Thomas, bought his sisters and brothers out, so he owned the farm there where Brad lives. Okay, this is my grandfather and grandmother. Thomas was raised where Brad lives now, and Nanny, I think, was working as a housemaid for Park Curwell's mother. So that would have been right down the road, and I think my grandfather went with her. I think the story is, I'm not 100% sure, that she was working for Park's parents at that time. So that would have been close at that time. And of course, at that time, no automobiles, so he'd have been by horse and buggy. My grandfather, Thomas, I do remember when I was a little kid, he had a car. He had a 33 Chevy. And I'd get in with him, and he'd go to Stanford once in a while, he'd go to the bank or grocery store or something. And anyway, when he'd let out on that clutch, you know, he couldn't let out on slow, he just jumped where he wanted to go. I remember that. My grandfather, Thomas, was not an outgoing person. When Jerry was younger, and my mother had a dinner, maybe an Easter dinner, and they were down there, and Jerry had a friend, Bobby Bridges, was out from Stanford. And there's probably more of them there. But anyway, when they got time to go home, evening, my dad got Bobby Bridges, Jerry's friend, took him back to Stanford, and then took my grandparents back to Covell. And Doug has told me the story, and I believe it. He says when my grandfather got out of the car, he threw his felt hat down on the well platform and stomped on it. He was mad because Dad was supposed to take him home first before he took Jerry's friend home. Tom, yeah, as far as I know, he always farmed. He had to farm with horses before, and when he quit, well, of course, Dad took over the farm. When Dad was farming that, and I can't tell you what year it was, Jerry was very small, but he was there at my grandmother's, and Dad and I were out plowing corn with tractors. I had the 36A, which was still down in the shed, and Dad had an Allis-Chalmers, and we were out, and a big black cloud come up, or storm come up there, and we headed to the house. Dad got in the gate, and I was ahead of him, and I got under the tractor, and the storm blew the barn down, the old house, chicken house. It blew stuff across the road out through that field there. And I know my grandfather had been in the crib there, and they had a little step place. There was a box full of dirt, was what it was, and he fell over that. And he got up from that, and he looked out, and he said, I'm ruined. So all the buildings were gone all over the place. But we started picking things up, and the neighbors come in and help pick up stuff out of the field and so on and so forth. And he wasn't ruined, but he had no sense of humor. He was a very serious guy. Yeah. My grandmother would laugh and so on and so forth, but he was very serious all the time. They had a woman stay with him after he had a stroke, and he was incapacitated, and my grandmother couldn't take care of him. They always had a hired help come out there and take care of him. He died in the hospital. I don't remember my dad going up and seeing him, but I probably saw him once in the hospital, I think. My dad was raised at Covell. Of course, he was the only child, and didn't have electricity at that time. I remember he had a bicycle, a big wheel and a little wheel on it. I think he had one of those. We went to grade school. I don't know, he didn't go to high school. I'm not sure that he graduated from grade school. I'm not sure about that. My mother was raised, on the Henning farm. She had brother Orville, sister Vera, and a sister Violet. They went to Stanford to grade school, and they walked across the field there. They didn't go around the roads. I think they walked across that field when she went to grade school. My mother went to grade school and high school here. In fact, I think she taught the school down here on the corner at one time. Not for very long, but I think she taught there. Okay, this was my grandpa and grandma Henning, which was my mother's folks. And they lived down here on the farm. And my dad and my mother were married in that house there. Grandma Henning was a favorite, and there were favorites around Manure. My grandpa Henning, I was 3 years old when he died. He was on his deathbed, and there were several people sitting around the deathbed there. And they thought he quit breathing. They thought he was dead. He came back and says, "They're not quite ready for me." And then he was gone. We always wondered, I'd give him $1 million to know what he saw when he says, "They're not quite ready for me." I went to the grade school out here in the country, Bronze Grove. There were 3 of us in our class. Phyllis Henderson was Newell's sister, but she got rheumatic fever and she never did finish school. And Robert Dale Halvey. There was 10 kids in that Halvey family. Margaret Plinus had us in the 1st grade, and she had us for a year or 2. Did I go to high school? Yeah, I went to Stanford High School, all 4 years. I was at a disadvantage in a way because most of those kids that going to grade school together knew each other. I got along all right, but it was just to find that they had any experiences together. 19 or 20. Right now, there's just me. We're all gone. She was working at the McLean County Fair in the office, and I was working there as superintendent of poultry. I had kind of had my eye on her. She was up there, had the tents at that time with the station. I went up there one time and, on purpose, stumbled over the steak. She says, "Why don't you pick up your big feet?" So that was that was the first thing we said. So we got pointed, and I started going with her. And I went down. I think at that time, I superintendent of poultry. They took me to the state fair, and I had a job down there. But I came back and dated her from Springfield. She was raised at Flanagan, so she didn't have any relation around here. I had one sister, Dolores, and one brother, Bernard. They're both gone. She worked at the Farm Bureau office, and they had the office out at the fair and gave out the money and checks and so on and so forth. We were on a honeymoon. We were there, and we went out to, I think, into Kansas, and there was some kind of a lead mine or something there. And we driving a 38 Buick, which had at that time, had been my dad's, but we went in and went down to this lead mine and came back up, and there was the car. There was the keys in the car. The doors were locked. Her purse, I said, "You got the keys?" "Yeah, but my purse is in the car." So the guy that was running the ticket officer, he came over and had a piece of baling wire, and he went in through the window, got a hold of those keys and jingled them up, pulled them out. It was a lead and zinc mine, I think is what it was. Why we went down that in a honeymoon, I don't know, but that's something different. The reason we went down there, Johnny Hilberts had been going down there and couldn't go down there that year, and Ward wanted to know if we wanted to go and take their place. So we went down to it, and we never gave it up. Okay, when we were first married, we lived over where Kermit Smitker lived for a while. Perlowitz was the name. We were there for 3 years. Newell Henderson's dad died, and he wanted to know if I wanted to rent that because I was getting married didn't have a place to go really. But anyway, he says, I'm going to give that up if you want to see if you can farm that. So Henry Perlowitz owned that. And so we went there, we farmed that for 3 years, and then Park was going to quit. And I asked about the place here, and Park kind of strung me along for some time before he finally says, well, you can have it. Clarence and Dolores, her sister and her husband, and us, we used to go on trips. He rented cleaners in Minunk, and every year in about the first week of August, he'd take off and we would go somewhere. We went to Seattle, Washington. I drove out there, and we went up the Space Needle in Seattle, Washington. I remember that. We went up through Minnesota and North Dakota and out that way. But we went on a lot of trips. We were up through Canada and the East Coast together. I don't know about Brad, but David, I remember that we were shucking corn in the fall. It was late that day when I got there because I run a picker. Well, Ori and I run pickers together, you know. We had the old John Deere before we had, and we run seed corn pickers together. And I was late getting there. And then Hal Reining, which has been Andy's dad, was trucking, and he wanted to know. He was up on the truck and he wanted to know. I said, well, we had a boy. He knew she was in labor. I was young when I retired. But I'm not sorry. You boys were ready to take over, and I was where I could take care of things. The lot I got from Harvey Graff. He ran the Graff's implement store. I was talking to him one day, and I said, I need to buy a lot or something. He says, I got a lot, I'll sell you. I asked him what he wanted, $10,000 for the lot, and we took it. But it was several years before we built on it. The actual guy that built it was from Leroy, I think. He came down and he built the house. He roughed it in, but we kind of finished it up. I mean, we did the varnish and the painting. I think about this about every night for several hours. Well, she had psoriasis, she got bad. And she was in the hospital a moment, and she was over at Methodist in Peoria. That's where she died. But anyway, I only missed seeing her one day that she was in the hospital, and that was the day of John Yotter's funeral. I saw her every day, and I would go over and probably eat dinner before I saw her, and this was on a Monday. And I went over and I think I ate and went to her room. I don't think I went there, but I came back and she was laying pretty quiet. And I started gathering up things to bring home. And I thought, I can't do this. I can't do it. So I went up to her bedside, held her hand, stood there for about 20 minutes. And then the nurse come in. It was a bed with a railing, like a baby bed. They'd keep him falling by. The nurse come in and put that down and brought me a chair. I sat there and held her hand for about 2 hours. She was gone. When she was gone, I pushed the button for the nurse. 3 of them showed up the door right away. I said, she's gone. I couldn't feel bad. I don't feel bad today because she was ready to go. She told me 2 or 3 days ahead of time, you tell the women of the church, if they pray for me, pray that God takes me. And so you couldn't really feel bad. She was ready to go. Yeah. But about every night I think about sitting there holding her hand. I don't know why. But I couldn't feel bad because she was ready. She was well, and she didn't suffer any. She didn't writhe around any. She didn't suffer at all.